Welcome to Smacky's Garage. Today we're going to be changing things up a little bit. We're going to end up pulling the carburetor that we have on there off today, changing out the power valve on this to the right size to match that engine, and then we're going to install it and see how it does. Alright, so I've had this Holley carburetor on here ever since I built the car. Now my intention there was to have a good street strip carburetor that's pretty much set up out of the box, but one of the things that I'm finding is I think the engine might be a little bit too wild for the tuning capabilities on the specific carburetor. And we'll walk through kind of why I'm changing it out as we switch. And then we'll also talk through why I'm not running a choke anymore, at least for now. So let's go ahead and I'm going to pull this out. All right, so we have these two carburetors here, and one of the first things that I want to do before we go through the differences between them is I'm going to drain the gas out of my old one just so that it doesn't evaporate over time. To simply drain the gas in this, all you really need to do on these, so the ones that don't actually have a gas drain on it, is to take out one of the bottom screws and the gas will just pour right out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on both sides. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at the main differences on these two carburetors. So Holley Ultra 750, this is a Brawler 750, no choke. All right, look at these two carburetors. Overall, they look pretty similar, but the main difference that I was going for on these is I wanted a car that wasn't running a choke and I wanted more adjustability in the carburetor itself. So this is the one that I've been running for the longest time. And one of the things that I want you to know while you look at the carburetors is when you start modifying your car heavily, you need a carburetor that can keep up with it and have an adjustability on it, especially if you're building your engine yourself. Or if you're like me and you just like really tinkering with things, then it's important that you get something that you can tinker with. Now, if we look at the two, one of the biggest things that I wanted to play with on this carburetor was the air bleeds. This carburetor has air bleeds that are adjustable. This one does not. So between the two of them, this one's going to give me more adjustability as I'm setting it up versus this carburetor. So that was one of the main draws to it. The other is, I wanted to do something where there wasn't a choke. So I've never experienced an old car without a choke before, so we're going to be trying this out and see how it works. Now, comparing the cost of these two carburetors, this one's actually more expensive, this Ultra street carburetor. So this one I believe is around $790, where this is in probably around the $670 range. So if I'm looking at comparing these two, for this one you're paying for a more streetable carburetor. You have the electric choke that comes with it, and it's set up good for street, drop it on and go. This one, even though it's cheaper, I'm going to get more adjustability out of it, which I'm really happy with. So I'm excited to try this one out. Now, one of the things I noticed on this carburetor is the idle mixture screws you can actually turn by hand, where on this carburetor you could not. So these have more thumb screws than these. I also noticed that it doesn't come with a ball to attach my throttle linkage to, so I'm going to have to take this one off and put it here. I mean, this one's brass, this one's not. I guess I'll swap it over for a non-brass one later. Some of the angles look a little bit different when I'm comparing these two. I think this is at a slightly different angle. It's definitely a different setup having a nut here versus this is just straight built in. I like seeing that this is also moved to a hex versus what we have here, which is just a straight screw. But there's some nice usability changes on it. The other thing I noticed is this carburetor itself has two different viewing holes of the gas level, so on both sides. So this side as well as the other side of the carburetor both have holes to view the fuel level in the carb. So on this one I also noticed a difference. You have this screw here which will help you get a little bit more air flow through the secondary. So if you wanted to set this up a little bit so that the secondaries are cracked, you could do that. Where on this side, it really wasn't that easy to do that. There's a screw underneath it But you can see here, the screws underneath, hard to get to, but on this one, it's nice and easy to get to. Now, one of the things I need to do before I put this on the car is I actually need to swap out the power valve on this. So on the primary side, there's going to be a power valve in here. So this needs to come off, and we need to quickly swap that out. Oh look, it's the right size. Now this definitely adhered over time to it. So this has a 4.5, and I'm going to be swapping it out for 2.5, as I know my current car makes about 5 pounds of vacuum. Now with that back on, everything goes right back together. Gaskets stayed in place. I'm not going to peel them off to take a look because there's a chance of damaging it, and I don't want to replace the brand new gaskets today. Okay, so with all that together, now I just need to swap over these fuel lines. So I'm going to put the fuel lines from this carburetor to that carburetor. And I got a new gauge too, because my gauge is looking pretty worn. So we're going to go ahead and swap those over. We should be ready to put it on the car. Okay, now with all these set up, all I need to do is I need to move the pin here. So this needs to come out and be moved to this, so I can have an attachment point for my throttle. So now with that ball there, I'm gonna check, motion looks good. Everything is moving the way it should. Everything's back together. It's ready to go back on the car. Now, one of the things I was really never thrilled with the spacer is how it fit. So it takes a lot to actually get it down. You can see some chipping here from it, from getting it across the 4 studs, because I use studs rather than bolts. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to drill these out one size larger just to get myself a little bit more space. Now this is cleaned up, should just drop right on. There we go. It's much easier. Then we can go ahead and put the new gasket on it, then the new carburetor. Right, this should just drop right in now. There we go. Everything looks clearanced, everything's fine. Have the bracket on. Okay, so everything is tightened down. Put the gas line on and we should be ready to start. With that in place, this is next. Everything looks done. Just need some gas. Now I do like the look of this carburetor with the purple anodized as well as the nice and clean silver. So it's a nice look. Now let me go ahead and let's see if we can get this running. Okay, first let's check for gas leaks. At this point I realized the car's running way too rich, and it wasn't because there was no choke on it, but it was completely just dumping gas into the engine and it wasn't idling correctly. Okay, so here we are a few days after I got the car running and taken a few things apart, was able to look at the primary sides, the idle mixture screws, and they were out 4.5 turns, which is way too much for this car. They probably were supposed to be a 1.5 turns from the factory, but for some reason they weren't right. So I need to go ahead and turn them back in, and I need to replace all my plugs because now they're fouled. So that's one thing to check before you install a carburetor in a car. Make sure all the settings are correct, or at least they're in the right range. It's something I should have done before I put this one on, but I didn't. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna fix these now. Okay, so the car is finally idling, which is really good. So I'm happy about that. It's still running really rich, so that's something I need to work on and fix. But, you know, it's gonna take a little bit of time to tune this carburetor correctly. I think the throttle blades are open too much, so I ended up taking the carburetor off, resetting everything, and I'm gonna see if I can just crack the secondaries to see if I can get it to idle with a better air to fuel mixture. I'm hoping I don't have to drill holes in the throttle blades like I did on the previous carburetor, but we'll see. Now, if you're interested in how this carburetor is working out, I'll make a video on it at the end of the summer, comparing a few different aspects of this to the carburetors that I've had previously. Thanks for tuning in on Smack's Garage. I'll see you next time.